You didn't lose your creativity. You exposed it too soon, and it died quietly. Not because it was bad, not because it lacked potential, but because it wasn't ready to be seen. That's the part nobody warns you about. In the first 5 seconds of an idea's life, it's fragile because it's forming. And the moment you drag it into the light, into opinions, feedback, validation, you interrupt something invisible. Momentum. Invisible momentum doesn't look like progress. It doesn't feel productive. There's no applause, no confirmation, just a strange, almost uncomfortable pull to keep going quietly. But most people can't sit in that silence. So they share. They post the concept, they tell a friend, they ask, "What do you think?" And that question, that one innocent question, fractures the entire process. Because now the idea isn't yours anymore. Now it's being filtered through someone else's certainty, someone else's limitations, someone else's need to make sense of something that isn't fully formed yet. And here's the brutal truth. People don't respond to what your idea could become. They respond to what it currently looks like, which in its early stage is almost always underwhelming. So they hesitate. They suggest tweaks. They dilute it. They unintentionally make it smaller. And you, without realizing it, start editing your vision to fit their comfort. That's how invisible momentum dies. Not with rejection, but with premature refinement. You start optimizing something that hasn't even had the chance to fully exist. Think about that. You're sculpting marble that hasn't hardened yet. Of course it collapses. And then you tell yourself, maybe it wasn't a good idea. But what if the problem wasn't the idea? What if the problem was exposure? Look at history for a second. The first electric light? Mocked, dismissed as impractical. Early airplanes? Called toys. Personal computers? Feared, misunderstood, avoided. Now imagine if those creators had opened the floor too early. Hey, what do you think about this flying machine? It's pointless. Fair enough, I'll stop. That's how most modern ideas die, not from failure, but from consensus. Because consensus feels safe. Agreement feels like progress. But real innovation almost never begins with agreement. It begins in isolation, in doubt, in contradiction, in something that doesn't make sense yet. And that's where people get uncomfortable. Because when an idea is still forming, it doesn't sound impressive. It sounds messy, incomplete, sometimes even stupid, which is exactly why it needs protection, not feedback, protection. There's a phase in creation that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not the beginning, it's not the execution, it's the incubation. And during incubation, your job isn't to impress anyone. Your job is to stay with the idea long enough for it to reveal what it actually is. But you keep interrupting that process. Every time you seek validation, you trade internal clarity for external noise. And the worst part, it feels productive. It feels like you're making progress because you're getting input. But what you're really doing is outsourcing belief. You're asking someone else to tell you whether your intuition is worth trusting. And intuition doesn't survive interrogation. It needs space. It needs repetition. It needs quiet. That's why your best ideas never seem to fully materialize. They don't fail in execution. They fail in exposure. Too early, too often, too publicly. And over time, something subtle starts to happen. You stop creating for discovery and start creating for reaction. You start thinking, how will this sound? Will people get it? Is this good enough to share? And just like that, your creativity becomes performance, not expression. Performance, which means every idea now carries pressure. Pressure to be clear, pressure to be impressive, pressure to be validated. But clarity doesn't come at the beginning. It comes after you've been confused long enough. And if you don't give yourself permission to stay in that confusion, uninterrupted, you never reach the clarity at all. So you keep starting, but you don't finish. You keep ideating, but you don't build. You keep talking, but nothing fully forms. And eventually you start believing something is wrong with you, that you lack discipline, that you lack consistency, that you lack execution. But that's not it. You've just never experienced what it feels like to protect an idea long enough for it to gain its own gravity. Because once it does, you don't need validation anymore. You have momentum. And momentum doesn't ask for permission. It pulls you forward, quietly, relentlessly, but only if you let it grow in silence first.
There's a version of you that finishes things. Not occasionally, not when you feel inspired, consistently. But that version of you doesn't share early. They disappear. Not dramatically, not to prove a point, just quietly. They stop explaining what they're about to do. They stop announcing intentions. They stop leaking unfinished thoughts into conversations that were never built to hold them. And something strange happens in that silence. At first, it feels like nothing. No feedback, no validation, no reassurance. Just you and an idea that still doesn't fully make sense. This is where most people panic, because without external input, there's nothing to stabilize you. No one telling you you're on the right track. No one correcting your direction. No one helping you optimize. It feels inefficient, almost irresponsible. But then, something shifts. Not instantly, not dramatically, subtly. You start noticing patterns, connections you didn't see before, angles that didn't exist when you first started. Clarity, not because someone gave it to you, but because you stayed long enough to uncover it. This is invisible momentum. It doesn't look like speed. It looks like depth. And depth compounds. While everyone else is bouncing between opinions, adjusting their ideas every time someone reacts, you're going deeper, refining internally, testing privately, building something that doesn't need to be explained yet, because it's not finished becoming. And here's where it gets uncomfortable again, because at some point, you'll feel the urge to share. Not because the idea is ready, but because you want relief. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from not knowing if this is worth it. Relief from carrying something that hasn't been validated yet. And that urge, that's the breaking point. Most people give in right there. They leak the idea. Just a little. Hey, I've been thinking about something. And within minutes, the spell is broken. The momentum slows. The clarity fades. Because now, instead of listening inward, you're reacting outward. You've shifted the center of gravity. Again. But if you resist that urge, if you stay just a little longer, something rare happens. The idea starts to stand on its own. You don't need to defend it anymore. You don't need to explain it prematurely. You don't even need to question it as much. It has structure now. Not perfect, but solid. And when you finally do share it, it lands differently. Because you're not presenting a fragile concept. You're presenting something that has survived your doubt, your confusion, your internal resistance. And that changes everything. People don't shape it as easily. They don't redirect it as quickly, because it already has direction. This is what separates unfinished thinkers from actual creators. Not intelligence, not talent, not even discipline. Protection. the ability to protect something before it's ready. Because once something is fully formed, feedback is useful. But before that, feedback is distortion. And distortion kills originality. Look at the patterns. Every breakthrough you admire didn't emerge from constant collaboration. It emerged from someone staying with an idea long enough to make it undeniable. Not acceptable, undeniable. There's a difference. Acceptable ideas fit into existing frameworks. Undeniable ideas create new ones. But you can't create something new while constantly checking if it fits. So, you have a choice. Keep sharing early, keep diluting your instincts, keep confusing motion with progress, or get quiet, uncomfortably quiet. Let your ideas breathe without interruption. Let them be ugly. Let them be incomplete. Let them exist without needing to be understood immediately. Because the truth is, your first idea is messy. It should be, but it's not supposed to be judged in that state. It's supposed to be developed, and development requires privacy. Not secrecy out of fear, but protection out of intention. There's a version of your idea that is powerful, clear, focused, unshakable. But it doesn't exist yet, and it never will if you keep dragging it into rooms that demand clarity before it's ready. So the next time you feel the urge to share something early, pause. Not to doubt yourself, but to ask a better question. Is this ready to be understood, or still becoming? And if it's still becoming, close the door. Stay with it. Let it grow teeth. Because once it does, you won't need permission. You won't need validation. You won't even need confidence. You'll have something stronger. Conviction. And conviction doesn't come from being told you're right. It comes from building something no one else saw clearly, until you finished it. If this hits something real for you, don't just move on. Subscribe and stay close to ideas that actually sharpen how you think, not just entertain you. Like the video so more people stop killing their ideas too early. And if you've been sharing too soon, start differently today.